What if a single typo on an exam could spark a revolution? In a room full of nervous children, one brave 10-year-old girl dared to raise her voice. What started as a quiet observation about a small mistake soon escalated into a full-blown protest, shaking the entire school, attracting media attention, and even forcing changes to Florida's education system. But how did one child's courage lead to a million-dollar lawsuit and the downfall of a statewide testing system? This is the unbelievable story of Kayla Michaels, and it all began on a tense Wednesday morning. It was early Wednesday morning, and the exam hall buzzed with nervous energy that felt almost tangible. The wide room, usually filled with chatter and laughter during assemblies, now stood in a suffocating silence, broken only by the occasional shuffle of shoes or the soft rustle of paper. Rows of wooden desks lined the hall like silent sentinels, each neatly arranged and topped with a freshly placed test booklet and a sharpened pencil, waiting for its young owner to pick it up. The heavy weight of expectation seemed to float in the air, pressing on the students' shoulders like an invisible force. A faint, sharp scent of ammonia lingered, a reminder of the janitor's early morning cleaning spree to make the hall spotless. The students, however, weren't thinking about the clean floors. They were too busy shifting in their seats, fidgeting with their pencils, and trying to calm their pounding hearts. The atmosphere was so tense that even the slightest creak of a chair sounded like thunder, reminding everyone that this wasn't just any ordinary school day. Among the sea of anxious faces sat 10-year-old Kayla Michaels, a girl who didn't quite blend into the crowd. She sat up straighter than most, her neat brown hair tied into a ponytail with a simple ribbon, and her sharp, attentive eyes carefully taking in everything around her. Unlike some of her classmates who nervously tapped their feet or chewed on the ends of their pencils, Kayla's expression was one of quiet focus. She wasn't just there to take a test, she was there to prove something, to herself, to her teachers, and maybe even to the world. Known for her quick thinking and detail-oriented mind, Kayla was a top student, someone who always caught the small details others overlooked. But today, as she sat among her fourth-grade classmates, something felt different. It wasn't just the usual test jitters. A strange feeling gnawed at her, a mix of curiosity and unease. Kayla's small fingers brushed against the glossy cover of the test booklet, and she paused for a moment, as though sensing that something wasn't quite right. Taking a slow, deliberate breath, she flipped to the first page. Her brow furrowed almost instantly. Her eyes darted back and forth across the instructions, scanning them as though she were solving a puzzle. Then she saw it, a glaring typo. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her, but no, the error was real. It wasn't just a simple misspelling. It was a mistake that made the instructions sound clumsy and confusing. Kayla's lips tightened. She felt her heart thud louder, the thought flashing in her mind. How could they make a mistake like this on something so important? For a brief moment, she considered staying quiet. After all, wasn't it easier to just ignore it and move on? But that wasn't Kayla. Her conscience wouldn't let her. "Excuse me, teacher," Kayla said, her hand shooting into the air. Her voice was soft, but it carried a firmness that sliced through the tense silence of the room like a blade. Every head turned in her direction. Mrs. Watkins, the invigilator, raised her eyebrows slightly and walked toward Kayla's desk. "Can you come here?" Kayla asked politely, though her heart was racing as if she'd just run a mile. The teacher, slightly puzzled by the interruption, leaned down toward Kayla. "Yes, Kayla. What's the matter?" Kayla pointed at the test booklet. "There's something wrong with the instructions," she said, her tone calm but steady, despite the nervous flutter in her chest. "Look at this. It says carefully instead of carefully. This is an English test, isn't it? How could such a mistake be on a test this important? Mrs. Watkins blinked, then took the booklet from Kayla's desk. Her frown deepened as her eyes scanned the page. "Oh dear, that is indeed a typo," she admitted, almost as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "But don't worry, the test questions have been thoroughly reviewed. Please proceed as planned." Kayla's eyebrows knitted together in disbelief. Her voice grew firmer, carrying a hint of frustration. "If the instructions have a mistake, how can we trust the rest of the test? This is supposed to measure how smart we are. But how can we do our best if the test itself is wrong?" Her words, though spoken by a 10-year-old, carried the weight of a much older soul. A ripple of murmurs began spreading through the students like a slow but unstoppable wave. Heads turned, and whispers filled the air. Some of the children craned their necks, eager to see what Kayla was talking about. "She's right," one boy whispered. "If they can't even get the instructions correct, how do we know the questions are okay?" Another girl nodded. Soon, more voices joined in. The exam hall, once silent as a graveyard, was starting to buzz with restless energy. Mrs. Watkins raised her hands, trying to calm the storm. "Quiet, everyone! We need to focus on the test," she ordered. But her voice was no match for the growing chorus of students demanding answers. Kayla's heart was pounding like a drum, but she refused to back down. "We deserve a fair test," she said, her voice rising above the chatter. "If they can't give us that, how can we be graded fairly?" Her boldness struck a chord with her classmates. Even the shy, quiet students who normally stayed silent began to nod in agreement. The tension escalated quickly. Children began putting down their pencils, some crossing their arms in defiance. A few, emboldened by Kayla's stand, tore small pieces of paper from. "Children, this behavior will not be tolerated," the principal boomed as he entered the room, his voice echoing like thunder. The chatter died down momentarily, but the defiance in the students' eyes remained. He marched directly up to Kayla, his expression stern, and their test booklets, and folded them into paper airplanes, tossing them in the air as a sign of rebellion. The exam hall was descending into chaos. Mrs. Watkins, realizing she was losing control, called for backup. Within minutes, the school administrators stormed in, their faces etched with shock and frustration. They not to be cold in a script of lores, and they worried included to their unyielding. "You need to stop this now. Do you understand the consequences of what you're doing?" Kayla's hands trembled slightly in her lap, but she raised her chin. "We're not doing anything wrong. We're just asking for what's fair. How can you test us with something that isn't even correct?" That was the breaking point. Her classmates erupted in support, chanting in unison, "We won't write! We won't write!" Their voices filled the hall like a battle cry, echoing off the walls and gaining momentum with every word. The principal, clearly overwhelmed, began calling the parents of the students and even threatened to cancel the exam. By now, the story had spilled beyond the school walls. Parents started arriving, confused and angry, demanding explanations. A local news crew, tipped off by a parent, arrived at the school gates with cameras rolling. Reporters began interviewing parents and students, capturing the drama that was unfolding. Kayla, once just another quiet fourth grader, had become the face of a student protest that no one could ignore. Her parents, Michelle and Lee, arrived at the school, both brimming with a mix of pride and worry. "Kayla," her mother said softly, kneeling beside her, "do you understand what this means? You're standing up for something important." Kayla nodded, her eyes glistening with determination and a courage far beyond her years. The issue escalated further when Kayla's parents decided to take legal action. For them, this wasn't just about a typo anymore. It was about the integrity of the entire education system. Within weeks, the case reached court, and Kayla stood before a judge, her small frame dwarfed by the towering courtroom, but her spirit unshaken. "There should be no room for error in something as important as education," Kayla said firmly, her voice ringing out like a bell. The judge leaned forward, visibly impressed by the young girl's courage and clarity. After careful consideration, The court ruled in Kayla's favor, awarding her family $1 million in damages. The decision sent shockwaves throughout the state's education system. Governor Robert Domingo of Florida, upon hearing the case, decided that enough was enough. He signed a bill eliminating the outdated FSA testing system, replacing it with a modern progress monitoring approach that valued students' growth and potential over a single, high-stakes test. Kayla's stand had become more than just a protest. It had sparked a movement. Across Florida, students, teachers, and parents celebrated her bravery. Kayla Michaels, the 10-year-old girl who refused to stay silent, had changed the future of education for thousands of children. Her name became synonymous with fairness and positive change. She was no longer just a bright student from Ferndale. She was a symbol of resilience, determination, and the belief that even the smallest voice could spark a revolution. And to think, it all began with a single typo on a test paper.